Hi guys, my name is Gagandeep Kaur and today in this lecture I'll discuss about labor and its causes. So first of all, what is labor? It is basically the series of events takes place in the genital organs, that is the uterus, cervix and vagina, to expel the viable products of conception, that is fetus, placenta and membranes, both amnion and chorion, from the womb to the outer world through vagina. So the labor, it is basically the series of events which takes place in the genital organs, that is the uterus, cervix and vagina, basically to expel the viable products of conception. Viable means the baby fetus become viable at 24 weeks, and the meaning of viable means the chances or the ability of surviving. That is, the baby become or the fetus become viable at 24 weeks of gestation, and the meaning of viable is the capability of surviving. Means if the baby is born at 24 weeks or after 24 weeks, the baby is able to survive in the artificial conditions. So to expel the viable products of conception from the womb to the outer world through vagina. So next are the types of labor. There are two types of labor. One is eutosia and the second one is dystocia. Eutosia is also known as normal labor, while dystocia is known as abnormal labor. So the labor is considered to be normal if it fulfills the certain criteria. So the labor is considered to be normal if it fulfills the following criteria. That is, the onset of labor is spontaneous. Means the labor is started by its own, and at term means at 40 weeks of gestation, as 40 weeks is a normal gestation period. Next is vertex presentation. Means the presentation or the presenting part must be had, as there are various other presentations too, like breech presentation, pedalic presentation, but vertex presentation is considered to be the normal one. Next is without undue prolongation, And next one is natural termination with minimal aids, means with less help. And the next one requirement is no complications, which leads to healthy mother and baby. So that's all about the eutosia, that is the normal labor. Next, in case of dystocia, that is abnormal labor, if any deviation from these points or from these criteria, then it will be considered as an abnormal labor. Like in first point, here is spontaneous in onset, and in dystocia it may be induced or aided. And next one is at term, and here the baby may born before 37 weeks, so it is known as preterm labor. So next one is vertex presentation. So in dystocia there may be podalic presentation, breech presentation, that is the presentation other than vertex, or there may be the complications in the vertex presentation, that is the presentation is maybe other than vertex presentation, or there is a vertex presentation with complications. Next is natural termination with minimal aid. So here the nature of termination may modified. Like in the case of, here it is with minimal aids, or here maybe with the maximum aid, like for example in forceps delivery. Oh, sorry, I left one point, that is without undue prolongation. So in case of dystocia there may be a prolonged labor. Next one is no complications. So here the complications are there which affects the prognosis of mother and baby. Prognosis means the treatment success or the recovery. So the recovery may affected. So next are the causes of labor. There are various causes of labor. These are basically the hypothesis. So in this, the first one is uterine distension. There is the stretching of uterus or distension of uterus. So the uterine distension occurs due to the growing fetus and liquor amni, that is the amniotic fluid, which is 600 ml at term. So with the growing fetus and liquor amni, the uterus may distended. And because of the distension of uterus, it leads to increase in gap junctions, that is the increase in the channels between the cells. Like these are the cells, so these are considered as channels. So the gap junction basically helps to pass the information or for the communication from the cytoplasm of one cell to another. It basically helps to control the myometrial contractions and relaxations. Control the myometrial contractions and relaxations. So if there is an increase in gap junction which leads to increase in oxytocin receptors at myometrium. So if the gap junction increases, it leads to increase in oxytocin receptors at myometrium, as well as there is increase in specific contraction associated proteins, that is the actomyosin. It is basically the complex of actin and myosin, which are the contractile proteins. Actomyosin, it is a complex or the mixture of actin and myosin, which are the contractile proteins, help in the constriction. So with the increase in gap junctions, there is an increase in oxytocin receptors at myometrium. Myometrium is a middle layer of uterus. It is basically a muscular layer which helps in the distension of uterus. So along with this, there is an increase in specific contraction associated protein, that is actomyosin. It is basically the complex of or mixture of actin and myosin, which helps in contraction. So it helps in uterine contraction, which leads to the occurrence of labor, or it is also known as initiation of labor. So I hope it is clear. that uterine distension, it is the first cause. With the growing fetus and leukoamni, that is amniotic fluid, uterus distended, and there is an increase in gap junction. So with the increase in gap junction, there is increase in oxytocin receptors at myometrium, as well as increase in specific contraction associated proteins, that is ectomyosin, and it leads to the initiation of labor. So the next cause is feto-placental contribution. So in this, at term means at 40 weeks of gestation, at term, in the fetus, the hypothalamus releases the CRH hormone, that is corticotrophin releasing hormone in the fetus. Okay, at term in the fetus, hypothalamus releases the corticotrophin releasing hormone, which stimulates the anterior pituitary of fetus and anterior pituitary release ACTH hormone, that is adenocorticotrophin hormone. So this hormone stimulates the adrenal glands of fetus. So adrenal glands releases cortisol, and when the cortisol releases in fetus, it stimulates the placenta, and placenta releases the two hormones, that is oxytocin, it's estrogen and prostaglandin in the mother. Okay, so this process goes on in mother's body, that is the placenta releases the estrogen and prostaglandin. So what are the functions of estrogen, or what estrogen do? So first of all, estrogen. When estrogen releases in the maternal body, it basically stimulates the maternal anterior, it's posterior, maternal posterior pituitary, which leads to release of oxytocin. Okay, so estrogen stimulates the maternal posterior pituitary gland, which in result release the oxytocin. So oxytocin basically helps in the uterine contractions. Okay, so this is the first one. And next, estrogen also increases the oxytocin receptors at myometrium. Okay, so this one is its second point, that is it increases the oxytocin receptors at myometrium. And the next one is estrogen estrogen cause irritability in uterus, which leads to uterine contractions. So this is the third point. So what estrogen did, or what estrogen do in maternal body, that estrogen cause the irritability in uterus, which leads to uterine contraction. And the previous 2 points was the estrogen it stimulates the posterior pituitary gland of mother, which leads to the release of oxytocin. And estrogen also increase the receptors, that is the oxytocin receptors at myometrium layer of uterus. So that's all about the estrogen. And next one is prostaglandin, which is also released by the placenta So prostaglandin, what prostaglandin actually do, prostaglandin, it helps in the contraction of smooth muscles of myometrium. So the next one is okay, so here we talk about the another hormone, that is progesterone. So it is another cause. Our previous cause was the uterine distension, and the next one was feto-placental contribution, and this is third one, that is progesterone. So the progesterone, it is a hormone which actually inhibits the uterine contractions. So means it stops the uterine contractions. So at term means at the time of delivery or at the time of labor, the synthesis of this hormone drops. That is, the synthesis and release of this hormone drops or reduced So if the synthesis and release of this hormone reduced, estrogen dominates. So if estrogen level increases and progesterone level is decreasing, so it leads to the synthesis of prostaglandin. This alteration in the levels of estrogen and progesterone leads to the synthesis of prostaglandin, which helps in the contractions. Contractions of smooth muscles of myometrium. So this one is our third cause. Next we move forward towards our next cause, that is oxytocin and myometrium oxytocin receptors. So in this cause, it includes the following points, like the oxytocin receptors, that is the oxytocin receptors increases at term, which we already discussed, but we didn't discuss about the area where the oxytocin receptor mostly increases. So it basically increases more in the fundal area, okay, as compared to the lower segment. It increases more in the fundal part, that is in the that is also known as upper segment of uterus. So next point is uterus become more sensitive to oxytocin at term, and if the uterus become more sensitive or it becomes more irritable, then it leads to the uterine contractions. And the next point is Ferguson's reflex. It is also important from the Viva point of view, that is the Ferguson's reflex. So in the Ferguson's reflex, if we put slight pressure on the vagina or cervix, like at term, when the lady is in labor, there is stretching effect on the vagina and cervix so that the baby can move out of the womb, which leads to stimulation of maternal posterior pituitary gland, and which will in result releasing oxytocin, which helps in contractions. So if we put pressure on vagina or cervix, like if there is a stretch or pressure on vagina and cervix, it stimulates the maternal posterior pituitary gland. There is also an example, like if we do PV, that is per vaginal examination, it also exert a pressure on the vagina and cervix, which helps to stimulate the maternal posterior pituitary gland, which releases the oxytocin. So this is known as Ferguson's reflex. So this one is our fourth cause, and our last cause is neurological. So there is a hypothesis that maybe even if the contractions or the labor is going on in the denervated uterus, but still there are alpha and beta adrenergic receptors are present there, which helps in the contractions basically in the lower segment, that is the alpha and beta adrenergic receptors are present there, which helps in the contraction basically at the lower segment of uterus. So that's all about the labor and its causes. So I hope you all understand about that clearly, and if there is any query, any kind of query, you can ask me in the comment section.